Chapter 214. Mu Jizong was displeased. Cheng Jieli immediately said, "Fellow Niu, it's not easy for an independent cultivator to earn some spiritual stones. You better save it for pills." The other two disciples chimed in as well. "I know what I'm doing," Li Qingshan said indifferently. "I've killed a bunch of Qi practitioners like you, and that's all I have. It really is not easy. However, there's no reason for me to let a group of insignificant people like you look down on me." He did not mind being mocked by others, but he could not bear to see them mock Yu Zijin. He said to the tea brewer, "Uncle, give me the most expensive one. That worryless tea or something." Li Qingshan sat down boldly beside a tea table. He was in an extremely bad mood. He could not help it. He had several hundred spiritual stones on him, and he even had a spiritual stone mine underground. If he insisted that he was not a nouveau riche, then he would be lying. The tea brewer finally raised his head and studied Li Qingshan. There were not a lot of people who could afford worryless tea in a town that mainly consisted of Qi practitioners. He said indifferently, "Please wait a moment." He began brewing the tea by himself. The disciples of the Green Vine Mountain were all stunned. The worryless tea was a famous tea from the Tranquil Tea House. A single pot cost an astronomical 27 spiritual stones. If it were converted into Qi gathering pills, it would be enough for a Qi practitioner to cultivate for a year or two. Even Mu Jizong was reluctant to use that to buy a pot of tea. He smiled dryly. "Fellow Niu, how generous of you." Yu Zijin tugged at Li Qingshan's sleeve and tried to persuade him softly, "Niu Juxia, that's so expensive." Li Qingshan patted the exquisite wooden tea stool beside him. "I'm drinking it myself. What's there to be afraid of?" These were his heartfelt words. One of his great ambitions in life was to taste all kinds of delicacies. Although tea probably couldn't be counted as one of them, he wanted to try anything that could satisfy his appetite. Since he couldn't drink all the teas in the world, then he would drink the best. And his principle towards strangers, especially people he did not like, was to not owe anything. Why would he drink the tea that someone else had invited him to? Yu Zijin sat down beside him. She could vaguely sense that Li Qingshan wanted to stand up for her, which made her feel rather mixed. The disciples of the Green Vine Mountain all looked at Mu Jizong, unsure whether they should sit down or not. They also wanted to try the worryless tea. Mu Jizong thought to himself, "Since you want to put on airs at your own cost, so be it." Li Qingshan asked Yu Zijin about what happened after they parted. As it turned out, when Yu Zijin arrived on the Green Vine Mountain, she was supposed to start off as a servant disciple obediently. However, during the entrance ceremony, the Green Vine Elder appeared and tested everyone's talent. Her talent was the most outstanding. The Green Vine Elder was delighted, so he asked a few more questions about her origins. If she were a regular girl, she would have been frightened into silence by the majestic hall and the dignified foundation establishment cultivators a long time ago. However, Yu Zijin said, "Originally, I didn't want to come. He forced me to come." She pointed at Lu Fengrui and told him how he had threatened and coerced her to stop her from speaking carelessly. Tears streamed down her face. The children that Lu Fengrui had brought to the Green Vine Mountain from the Proud Sword Manor were close to this senior sister in the first place, so they began to feel homesick. A while later, all the children began to cry in the main hall of the Green Vine Mountain. The entrance ceremony turned into an awkward one. The Green Vine Elder felt rather embarrassed. He pointed at Lu Fengrui and cursed, "If someone else sees this, they'll think that all the disciples of our Green Vine Mountain have been abducted." Lu Fengrui knelt down in a hurry to apologize. Even among his fellow disciples, he was not well liked. No one spoke up for him. They all secretly mocked him. The Green Vine Elder left in a huff, and Yu Zijin turned the tables. As a matter of fact, she could even be described as turning the tables. However, the Green Vine Elder did not tell Yu Zijin to leave, nor did he tell her to join the Green Vine Mountain. As a result, she remained behind for some reason, becoming the only non-disciple of the Green Vine Mountain. Li Qingshan guessed that the Green Vine Elder probably wanted Yu Zijin to join the Green Vine Mountain, but he did not want to force her. The Green Vine Mountain accepted disciples, not enemies. Only someone as obstinate and self-opinionated as Lu Fengrui would be so unreasonable. The disciples could tell what the Green Vine elder was thinking, so they purposefully tried to get closer to Yu Zijian, persuading her to just join the Green Vine Mountain. Coupled with how likable she was in the first place, she had become familiar with everyone in less than a month. Coupled with the protection of an admirer like Mu Jizong, there was actually nothing an inner disciple like Lu Fengrui could do to her. The Sacred Hall, senior brothers and sisters all said that guy was a bad person. They told me not to take it to heart. Mu Jizong said awkwardly, Zijian, don't speak carelessly. Senior brother Lu is just a little rash. He's not a bad person. Although he disliked Lu Fengrui, he still had to protect his fellow disciples in front of outsiders. Li Qingshan had no idea how to respond to Yu Zijian's adventures. He could not help but sigh. Some people were born luckier than others. This luck did not come from powerful clans, but a certain ability, the ability to smile at the world. The world was like a mirror. If you smiled at it, it would smile back at you. They were not born with this ability. Instead, they had received the most gentle care and the most correct education from young. Li Qingshan and Chen Rongji were not as lucky. They had both developed vicious personalities from their lives. They used the claws and teeth known as cunning and resourceful, and valiant and resolute, to fight and kill in this world. This was the strength they relied on to survive. Yu Zijian was not resolute, nor was she particularly resourceful. Her cultivation was pitifully low. However, she could make the mature Hua Qinglu obtain an innate pill for her, and she could make the resolute Li Qingshan run several hundred kilometers for her. This was also her strength. At this moment, the tea brewer served up a pot of fragrant tea. When the tea was poured into the teacups, it was clear and colorless, just like clear water. However, it gave off a wondrous fragrance, which was relaxing. Li Qingshan said, I'll replace alcohol with tea. Thank you for taking care of Zijian. He drank all the tea, and a stream of heat flowed into his stomach, spreading out. Even his body warmed up. Not only did the fragrance linger in his mouth and teeth, but it basically lingered in his lungs too. Drinking a cup like that on a cold winter night was basically the best form of enjoyment. With a cup, all of his selfish thoughts seemed to have been cleansed away. He became completely lazy. Both the tea leaves and the tea water contained pure spiritual qi, which surpassed regular pills. It was extremely beneficial to both his body and mind. It really is good tea. Mu Jizong and the others sipped it slowly. They were indescribably relaxed. When they looked at Li Qingshan again, their arrogance had vanished, and they spoke with a little more politeness. As the saying went, it was hard to bear the consequences of being taken advantage of. Even if they mocked Li Qingshan after drinking such a famous tea, they were not that thick-skinned. Cheng Jieli's gaze towards Li Qingshan became slightly gentler. She could tell that Li Qingshan was not a poor independent cultivator trying to look impressive. Instead, he was a generous man who truly did not care about 20 or 30 spiritual stones at all. Women would always have a favorable impression of him. Li Qingshan smiled. The tea really does live up to its name of worryless. Only Mu Jizong was unable to cheer up. He had originally been the center of attention in this small circle, yet a pot of tea from this boorish fellow had stolen all the limelight. How could he just accept this? Fellow Nyo, the way you drink it seems to be a waste of the tea. Li Qingshan raised an eyebrow. What do you mean by that? Mu Jizong had been waiting for that. He smiled. He went on a long ramble, talking about the way of tea and the classics of tea, demonstrating his great knowledge. Cheng Jieli and the others gave him a few words of support. The two country bumpkins, Li Qingshan and Yu Zijian, just held their teacups, drinking as they listened. When Mu Jizong's speech came to an end and he wanted to drink some tea to moisten his throat, he discovered that Li Qingshan and Yu Zijian had already wasted all the remaining tea. He was immediately stunned. Yu Zijian said in admiration, Senior brother Mu knows a lot. Li Qingshan said, I feel like I've learned a lot too. Yu Zijian continued to drink slowly, but he really drank it like a bull, pouring cup after cup into his stomach. You're drinking my tea, yet you still have so much to say. There's no need for you to drink it. Cheng Jieli and the others felt fortunate that they had acted quickly. They did not forget to drink tea, snatching a few cups from Li Qingshan's mouth. It was enough for half a month of cultivation. The spiritual tea was not like the tea of the secular world, which could be brewed multiple times. The tea brewer had used a technique to infuse all the flavors of the tea into the spiritual water, so none of it went to waste. There was only a single pot. Yu Zijian rubbed her belly. "It's so warm." Li Qingshan said, "Exactly." The two of them looked at one another and smiled. All Yu Zijian saw was that Li Qingshan's eyes had become clear. They no longer had the sharpness from when they first met, but they seemed extremely calm and clear. He had gone from a vicious tiger to a gentle ox, which made him look at her a little more gently. Suddenly, she felt like she could not look at his gaze any more than the sharpness from before. She dodged his gaze and lowered her head. Mu Zhizong felt like everything he had said just now had been for nothing. He gritted his teeth and said, "Fellow Niu, do you understand the profoundness of the way of tea now?" Li Qingshan smiled. "I'm a crude person. I can't remember that much." He turned around and said to Yu Zijian, "What do you think, Zijian? Do you want to go back with me?" Before Yu Zijian could even answer, Mu Zhizong said firmly, "No. Without master's permission, Zijian cannot leave the Green Vine Mountain." Cheng Jieli tried to persuade him gently, "Senior brother." She was eager for Yu Zijian to go as far away as possible. However, if two men were to fight over something, it would not just be about the loss of the item, but also their pride. It was not something that could be persuaded by a few words from a bystander. Li Qingshan did not look at Mu Zhizong. He only said to Yu Zijian, "What do you think?" Yu Zijian immediately became hesitant. In the past few days, the disciples of the Green Vine Mountain had all taken great care of her. If she just left, she would feel like she was letting down their good intentions, and it would probably make things difficult for Niu Juxia. You should think about it. Don't worry about anything else. Just follow your heart. I believe the Green Vine Elder is a reasonable senior. Don't forget about the way I told you when to make a choice. Li Qingshan understood what she was thinking. He patted her shoulder and ignored Mu Zhizong's ugly expression. He stood up and arrived before the tea brewer to pay the bill. He had just fished out 27 spiritual stones from his 100 treasures pouch. The tea brewer said proudly, "How's my worryless tea? You might be able to taste it, but it's not like you're chewing on a peony." He specialized in the way of tea. As he watched Li Qingshan drink cup after cup, he was displeased. He finally could not help but say something. Chapter 215. Mu Zhizong laughed aloud. "You're not just chewing on peonies. Are you playing the lute to a cow? I'm just joking. I hope fellow Niu doesn't mind." Li Qingshan smiled faintly. "The tea is good, but the water is just so. Zijian, it's the same with making friends. You have to choose good water, or you'll be ruining the tea." Yu Zijian agreed with a murmur, which made Mu Zhizong's expression change. However, the tea brewer became irritated first. "Kid, you're pretending to know when you don't. You're blabbering nonsense. I've obtained this water from the Sky Spiritual Spring on Mount Biluo." Mu Zhizong said, "Fellow Niu, you probably haven't heard of the Sky Spiritual Spring before. It ranks 97th on the list of spiritual springs of the Green Province." This ranking was not very high, but it was already very impressive to be able to be ranked in the top 100 in the 30,000 miles of Azure Province. The top 96 places were all occupied by famous sects, so how could a small rogue cultivator have the chance to taste it? The tea brewer huffed. "Kid, you sure are knowledgeable. You really do come from the Green Vine Mountain after all," Li Qingshan said. "So what?" The tea brewer said, "So what? If you can bring out even better water, then I'll treat you to the pot of tea. Otherwise..." He gave off his aura. He was actually a 7th layer Qi practitioner. Yu Zijian said in a hurry, "Senior, please don't be angry. My friend was just saying." Li Qingshan stopped her and smiled. "There are probably more famous springs in the world than a single list of famous springs. Since Senior wants to treat me to it, then I'll accept." He took out a jar of clear water from his 100 treasures pouch and placed it before the tea brewer. This was a spiritual spring that Li Qingshan had found underground by following the spiritual river to its source. The water was cold and sweet, enough to seep into people's hearts. Although he did not know the way of tea, he could sense that the spiritual qi in the water was much denser than some sky spiritual spring. Most of the spiritual springs in the world originated from extremely deep underground. As they flowed to the surface, the spiritual qi would disperse, and the water quality would instead deteriorate. But how many people in the world could go deep underground, and how many people would go deep underground just for a jar of spirit spring water to make a cup of tea? That spirit spring was guarded by one of the strongest demons. Even if qi practitioners went there, they would only be able to survive. If Li Qingshan, the leader of the demon soldiers, wanted to drink some water, how could he refuse? The jar was just an ordinary porcelain jar. Mu Zhizong watched with folded arms, waiting for Li Qingshan to make a fool of himself. Yu Zijian was filled with worry and concern. The tea sommelier casually opened the porcelain jar and looked inside. The resentful sneer on his face suddenly froze. This water? A layer of white mist floated on the surface of the water, and as soon as the jar was taken out, a layer of water condensed on top of it. Mu Zhizong walked over impatiently. What do you think of this water? He was also stunned. The spiritual aura emitted from this jar of water was actually not inferior to that of many medicinal pills. The tea sommelier scooped up a cup of water in a hurry and drank it. He shivered. The clear water seemed to be even colder than ice. He refused to believe it, so he scooped up his own water with a copper ladle and placed it in the jar. Before long, the water in the ladle had actually frozen. That's right. This is ice condensate water. Li Qingshan had never thought the water he had retrieved from the underground spring would actually possess something like this. How is it? Is it better than your water? The tea sommelier said dejectedly, the ice condensate water that ranks 52 is obviously much better than sky spring water. I've misjudged you. I never thought Sir would actually be able to enter the Ice Sight Palace. I've never heard of this Ice Sight Palace. I've said it before. The renowned springs of the world cannot be covered by a mere list of renowned springs. Thank you for your hospitality, senior. As Li Qingshan said that, he was about to stash away the jar of water. Wait. The tea sommelier stopped Li Qingshan in a hurry. What? You're going back on your word? Li Qingshan asked. It's just a cup of tea. I can still afford it. I'm Lu Ziyu. How many spiritual stones are you willing to sell this jar of water for? Lu Ziyu's eyes shone, looking at Li Qingshan eagerly, or perhaps the jar of ice condensate water. The people of the Green Vine Mountain had never expected the situation to develop like this. This Nyojuxia had actually taken out spiritual water that completely surpassed the sky spring. Not only did they not spend a single copper coin to drink this extremely luxurious pot of renowned tea, but they even made a profit. Mu Zhizong was surprised. Are you old Senior Lu? Lu Ziyu's cultivation was not particularly great, but he was skilled in the way of tea, so he was rather renowned among qi practitioners. It was said that he had brewed tea for many foundation establishment cultivators in the past and was treated as an esteemed guest. Never did they think he would actually appear in the town and manage this tranquil tea house. Lu Ziyu nodded reservedly. Mu Zhizong refused to accept this. I've heard that ice condensate water is suited for forging swords and artifacts, but I've never heard that it's suited for brewing tea. Lu Ziyu said, how ignorant. The temperature of ice condensate water is extremely low, so most people think it's unsuited for brewing tea. Little do they know that only when ice and fire work together can the taste of tea be unleashed to the limit. However, it requires extremely great skill from the tea master. He was obviously a tea master with great skill like that. Suddenly seeing such fine water, how could he let it go? Mu Zhizong's face darkened, but he could not lose his temper. Li Qingshan said, please name your price, senior. Lu Ziyu said, 30 spiritual stones. Cheng Jieli cried out slightly. The jar of water was actually even more expensive than the pot of tea just now. 30 spiritual stones was a tremendous sum to a measly qi practitioner like her. Li Qingshan said, Given Senior's character, you won't go so far as to cheat me. 30 spiritual stones then. Lu Ziyu never expected Li Qingshan to not haggle. He rejoiced inside and nodded while stroking his beard. You're worth teaching. However, I do have a small request. What is it? Senior, please use this water to brew a pot of worryless tea for me. Lu Ziyu glared at him. Kid, don't be too greedy. He wanted to waste his water and his tea leaves. If he used the ice condensate water to brew a pot of worryless tea, he would have to sell it for at least 50 spiritual stones. Li Qingshan said, I won't hide it from Senior, I have more than this jar of water. He paused for a moment. I would also like to see Senior's profound tea ceremony. If Senior really won't agree, then I can only keep this water for myself. He sighed and was about to put away the water. Wait, I'm itching to try my hand today. I'll satisfy your small request. Lu Ziyu gritted his teeth and agreed. If only the cost was considered, this price seemed barely acceptable. Listening to Li Qingshan's words, not only did he have more than one jar of water, but he also seemed to know where the spring was. If he could provide him with this ice condensate water for a long time, it would definitely be of great benefit to his tea ceremony. Lu Ziyu couldn't wait to scoop up the water and cook the tea. Every movement was elegant and natural, but he didn't use an open flame. Instead, he held the teapot in his hand and used his own true qi to cook the tea. He precisely controlled the heat, and there was nothing else in his eyes. A moment later, Lu Ziyu let out a light breath and opened the lid of the teapot. A strange fragrance rose and lingered, far superior to the worryless tea from before. The guests behind the curtains suddenly stopped what they were doing and turned their heads. A few qi practitioners on the street outside stopped and sniffed. What is this smell? It smells so good. Chapter 216. Lu Ziyu held up the ice condensate water, not caring about anything else. If you have water, you must bring it to me. Li Qingshan replied perfunctorily and left. He didn't expect that the water he found underground could be sold for such a good price. He was still a beginner when it came to the exploitation of underground resources. Holy Church, old man Lu, why are you hiding such good tea and not letting us have a taste? A man lifted the bamboo curtain and shouted. I'm coming. Lu Ziyu took down the bamboo plate from the wall, wiped it with his hand, and added 20 spirit stones to the price. Zijian, are there any places that sell cultivation methods here? Li Qingshan saw how Yu Zijian still needed to think about it, so he was in no hurry. It was rare for him to come across a market where cultivators bought and sold, so he obviously had to take a proper look around and buy a few items that he could use. Mu Jitsong and the others became even more certain that he was an independent cultivator. Only independent cultivators would need to buy cultivation methods. Yu Zijian was troubled. I'm not sure either, Mu Jitsong said. There's one in the corner up ahead. Fellow Niu, it's getting late, so we need to return to the Green Vine Mountain. Let's bid farewell here. All right. Zijian, take some time to consider it. I'll probably stay here for a few days. Once you've made up your mind, come down the mountain and let me know. Li Qingshan said happily. Since Yu Zijian was safe and sound this time, there was nothing for him to worry about. Even if he really did decide to join the Green Vine Mountain, it was fine. Furthermore, he and Mu Jitsong were on the verge of falling out, so there was no point in gathering again. Mu Jitsong was rather surprised by how straightforward Li Qingshan was. For a moment, he was unsure whether he was interested in Yu Zijian or not. Who would have thought that Li Qingshan's ambitions were in the 9 heavens? Although he would be moved when he saw a beautiful and adorable girl, he would not be too entangled in these romantic affairs. He would just let fate take its course. Yu Zijian said, Thank you, Niu Juxia. I've already considered it. Li Qingshan was surprised. Really? It's rare for you to make such a decision. Are you going to stay or leave? I've decided to go to the 100 schools of thought. Yu Zijian said calmly, a drastic change from her usual indecisiveness. Mu Jitsong's face reddened. Zijian, you better think it through. Our Green Vine Mountain isn't any weaker than any of the 100 schools of thought. Yu Zijian said sincerely, Thank you for taking care of me in the past few days, Senior Brother Mu. However, I've already promised Qinglu that I'll go to the 100 schools of thought with her to study, and I need to repay her for the innate pill. Then she smiled at Li Qingshan. Niu Juxia, is this what you meant by making a choice? Li Qingshan clapped his hands and praised, exactly. It's not like you're a disciple of the Green Vine Mountain, so why don't you come with me right now? Mu Zhizong said anxiously, don't even think about it. Without my master's orders, however, Yu Zijin shook her head. I can't leave yet. Qinglu has received my letter, so she'll definitely find a way to find me. If I leave right now, wouldn't she be coming empty-handed? And I can't just leave like this. It's already been a month. That friend of yours might not necessarily come. Li Qingshan expressed his doubts over the friendship between the two girls. Qinglu will definitely come. Yu Zijin was extremely certain. I hope she doesn't betray your trust, or it'll be her loss. Li Qingshan smiled. Who said weak people did not have their own perseverance? Being able to trust others was also an impressive ability. If Qinglu really could come and resolve the problem properly, that would obviously be for the best. I'll still be staying here for a few days. If you change your mind, come find me after you leave the mountain. Li Qingshan glanced at Mu Zhizong. By then, it probably wouldn't be so easy for her to leave the mountain again. It was impossible for him to charge up the Green Vine Mountain and face a Foundation establishment cultivator. He had to take responsibility for his own choices. Even kind-hearted and cute girls needed to understand this. Li Qingshan clasped his hands and left. Yu Zijin watched as his tall figure merged into the crowd and lights. She said extremely softly, "Thank you," thanking him for respecting her choice. Li Qingshan took out the pot of worryless tea from his 100 treasures pouch and shoved it into the bamboo basket on his back. A soft, white hand accepted it. Little and leaned against the cotton cushion leisurely with one leg crossed over the other. He held a Buddhist scripture in one hand and a purple clay teapot in the other, drinking tea and reading a book by the spout of the teapot. The holy church. Li Qingshan let out a sigh of relief. At the end of the day, he still did not like dealing with these random people. He was a tiger that roamed the jungle. He had grown accustomed to the feeling of loneliness a long time ago. As he walked through the town, the stalls on the two sides sold a variety of goods. Apart from the common spiritual artifacts and pills, there were also a few fragments of secret manuals that some great cultivator had left behind, or the treasure maps to some mysterious dwelling. Although most of them were just fish eyes, there would be 1 or 2 pearls hidden in there from time to time. A lucky person would obtain them and rise to prominence. This kind of story would always inspire every Qi practitioner. However, if one wanted to find a pearl in this story, they would need to have extremely good foresight or luck. Li Qingshan obviously did not have good insight. He was still a country bumpkin in the cultivation community, and he did not like to rely on luck either. Moreover, he didn't like to rely on luck, so he took a quick look around before arriving at the bookstore that Mu Zhizong had mentioned, revealing an expectant expression. What he lacked the most right now was a method of practicing Qi. He never thought he would find a place like this. Good things come to good people. There were 2 simple words written on the blackboard, Book Mountain. When he walked in, he almost suspected that he had walked into a tea house again. There were neither bookshelves nor books here. The only book was in the shopkeeper's withered hands. An old man was lying on a rocking chair. There was also a pot of tea on the small table next to him. He flipped another page before putting down the book in his hands. He said slowly, "Fellow Daoist, what book would you like to buy?" Li Qingshan said, "Uncle, I want to buy a method of practicing. Do you have it here?" The old man smiled and said, "If you don't, why would I still open this shop?" He took out a bamboo scroll from his 100 treasures pouch and tossed it to Li Qingshan. "All the methods are on there. Take your time to choose." Then he continued to bury his head in the book. Li Qingshan opened the bamboo scroll doubtfully and injected his true qi into it. A few words in ink naturally appeared on the bamboo scroll. Body refinement, qi refinement. He tried to focus his mind on the 2 words, qi refinement. The original words in ink seemed to float away as if they were soaked in water. They condensed again and became yin-yang, metal, wood, water, fire, earth. He randomly chose the word fire, and more than 10 methods appeared. This was only the first page. There were probably more than 100 methods in total. Other than the Bing fire method of qi refinement, he had never heard of any of the others. He then chose the Bing fire method of qi refinement. The bamboo scroll showed various evaluations of this method. From the difficulty of practicing to the power of fighting, there was everything. Even a layman like Li Qingshan could basically estimate the quality of this method. This roll of bamboo slips was an encyclopedia of cultivation methods. No wonder there were no books placed here. Li Qingshan humbly asked for guidance. "Uncle, I am a loose cultivator. I don't know what method is good. Do you have any recommendations?" The old man smiled. "That depends on which method your body is suitable for. Do you know your yin-yang and the 5 elements?" "I don't know, but it should be water." The old man said, "Our store can test your body for 1 spirit stone each time. Do you want to test it?" Li Qingshan happily paid a spiritual stone. The old man fished out a scroll from his 100 treasures pouch and unfurled it. There were many profound inscriptions on it, and the twisting and turning lines formed a simple formation. The old man shook his hand and the scroll became 7 feet long. He spread it on the ground. "Sit on it and concentrate." Li Qingshan gently put down the bamboo basket and sat cross-legged in the middle of the formation. He closed his eyes and concentrated. "Let's test yin-yang first." The old man held the scroll. The formation immediately shone on Li Qingshan's body. It formed a small shadow on top of his head. The old man shook his head. "You can't cultivate any yin-yang techniques. It is extremely difficult to condense profound yin true qi. But you don't need to be discouraged. I can tell from your physique that you walk the path of yang." It was late at night, but there were still many people in the market. Suddenly, a dazzling light shone from the bookstore. The pedestrians covered their eyes and said in surprise, "What is this? Is it the birth of some treasure?" A qi practitioner squinted his eyes and looked into the bookstore. "What do you know? This is a yin-yang test. Well, when I first tested it, the light was only the size of a fist." A few qi practitioners walked into the bookstore. They saw a head-sized ball of white light floating above Li Qingshan's head. The old man praised, "You have an excellent aptitude for the profound Yang Dao. Cultivating profound Yang True Qi will be twice the result with half the effort." Li Qingshan said, "Old uncle, do you have any cultivation techniques to recommend?" "Don't be anxious. Let's test the 5 elements. Although the cultivation techniques derived from the yin and yang qi are all-encompassing, they are difficult to cultivate. You will need guidance from a master. I usually don't recommend rogue cultivators to cultivate them." As the old man spoke, he tested Li Qingshan's 5 elements. When he tested the wood, only a small blade of grass appeared above Li Qingshan's head. The old man shook his head. This was far worse than ordinary qi practitioners. When he tested the metal, a small sword appeared above Li Qingshan's head. The old man nodded slightly. When he tested the earth, a huge rock appeared above Li Qingshan's head. The old man's eyes lit up. He nodded even more. The earth element was above the yang element. A set of the Wu earth unyielding qi art was enough. When he tested his fire, a small ball of fire condensed above Li Qingshan's head. The old man thought it was a pity. His fire element was extremely mediocre. If it were as good as earth, then he could dual practice yang and fire. The true yang method of fire had been prepared for him. It was also rather strange. Normally, people with a powerful yang element would not have a particularly weak fire element. Could it be? The old man immediately thought. The 5 elements reinforced and restrained each other. Water and fire would restrain each other. Just like the yin and yang qi, if one was strong, the other would be weak. Then this kid's water element should be good. Because Li Qingshan thought he should have the water element, the old man tested his water last. A blue light filled the bookstore. Even though the old man was experienced and knowledgeable, he was shocked. Chapter 217. Li Qingshan closed his eyes. His mind was blank, but he felt like he had returned to the black water, where he had chased the blackwater salamander for 3 days and 3 nights. His heart condensed into water. His front, back, left, right, and every direction became flowing water. Like a tangible wave, it surged into the surroundings endlessly. The qi practitioners in the shop retreated subconsciously, circulating their true qi to block it. Only when the huge wave passed through them did they realize it was just an illusion formed from blue light. The wave even surged out of the bookstore, reaching the streets. The qi practitioners on the way were all extremely shocked, looking at one another in shock. What's going on? How can such a powerful illusion appear when testing the 5 elements? Who knows how many talented geniuses there are in this world? There's nothing we can do to be envious of them. Stop wasting time. Go buy some pills and prepare to enter secluded cultivation. We have to stand out in the herb gathering ceremony this time. The qi practitioner beside him glanced at the bookstore again before pulling his companion away. The old man said slowly, "You can rise now, sir." Li Qingshan stood up and said politely, "What do you think, uncle? Which cultivation method suits me?" To cultivators, choosing a suitable cultivation method was basically 10 times more important than choosing a suitable wife for mortals. If mortals married the wrong wife, they could still get a divorce. If it really did not work out, they could only endure it for a few decades at most. However, if cultivators chose the wrong cultivation method, they might lose a few hundred years of their lifespan, or they might die a violent death in battle. Li Qingshan was extremely cautious about this. He was not knowledgeable himself, so he obviously had to consult an expert. The old man stowed the formation scroll away slowly and said, "I've tested the constitutions of many independent cultivators for so many years. The number of people with such great talent in the innate 5 elements can be counted on one hand. If you cultivate Gui water true qi, you'll definitely be able to advance valiantly and advance at a tremendous pace. The water element techniques you use will also be far more powerful than regular people." Li Qingshan knew he was not some talented genius. This was probably due to the effects of the spirit turtle's method of qi suppression. When he practiced a certain demon's ability, he seemed to possess the nature of that demon. The spirit turtle was a divine beast of the water. Controlling the ocean was as easy as a child playing in a bathtub. The sacred temple, even if Li Qingshan had only inherited a sliver of the spirit turtle's intelligence, it would be perfectly normal for him to possess talent like this. His talent in metal and earth was probably related to the ox demon and tiger demon's divine abilities. Other cultivators probably wouldn't believe him. Apart from a small number of spirit herbs, no one had ever heard of a cultivation method that could change one's talent. Talent was a gift from the heavens. Although hard work could make up to it, it was not enough. However, the abilities that the black ox had taught Li Qingshan had completely changed his body and race. His so-called talent had instead become insignificant, not even worth mentioning. "Sir, I method. Who is I Gui? Is Aladayu method?" "I," said I method, Qingzhen, comma, and Saint, comma, 1, comma. The old man's eyes flickered. "Actually, with your talent, it's nothing difficult for you to find a sect that specializes in Gui water true qi. You don't have to buy a cultivation method from me. For example, a certain school in the 100 schools of thought specially requires their disciples to specialize in Gui water true qi. I just happen to be acquainted with their school leader." Li Qingshan said in admiration, "Uncle, you really are kind-hearted. You really are a scholar after all. However, I'm used to being free and undisciplined. I don't want to be restricted." He lowered his head and studied the bamboo slip again. With a thought, the various water element cultivation methods were all listed out. These cultivation methods were not too expensive. The more expensive ones were only a few dozen spiritual stones each, while the cheaper ones could be bought for around a dozen spiritual stones. Just now, the spiritual stones he had earned from selling water were enough for him to buy the Gui water method of condensing qi. Qi practitioner was still at the initial stage of cultivation after all. Qi practitioner cultivation methods were not some divine arts or secret manual, so it was obviously impossible for them to be ridiculously expensive. Moreover, only a nouveau riche like Li Qingshan would think that a few dozen spiritual stones were not expensive. It was unknown how many years it would take for an ordinary individual cultivator to accumulate enough spiritual stones. Therefore, on the catalog, there were several spiritual stones marked. The entire set of cultivation methods was sold separately. For example, the first 3 levels of the Gui water method of condensing qi only needed 5 spiritual stones. The few qi practitioners in the shop exchanged glances and whispered a few words. In that case, let this old man think about it. You can take a look for yourself first. The old man lowered his eyes as if he was disappointed that Li Qingshan insisted on buying his cultivation method. However, he also seemed to be relieved. He stroked his beard and pondered. Such a good material, as long as he chose the right cultivation method, he would definitely have a boundless future. Li Qingshan was filthy rich. He immediately found the most expensive water cultivation method. Although the most expensive was not necessarily the best, it was definitely not too bad. The Arts of the Boundless Ocean is worth 110 spiritual stones. It has a very high requirement for talent. When testing the 5 elements, you need to conjure a wave at the very least to be able to practice it. The difficulty of practicing it is also marked as extremely difficult, but after practicing it, your true qi will surge like the tide, boundless. However, it was labeled as incomplete at the back. Even if it was incomplete, it could still be practiced to mid-foundation establishment. This cultivation method was no longer just a method of practicing qi, which was why it was so expensive. No, this price was already a bargain. Li Qingshan thought, I cultivate the spirit turtle's method of sea suppression as a demon. Wouldn't it be a perfect match for me if I practiced the arts of the boundless ocean as a qi practitioner? Uncle, how about I practice the arts of the boundless ocean? The arts of the boundless ocean was originally a core cultivation method of a sect called the Ocean Sect. Once you practice it to the 9th layer, you can condense an ocean pearl in your body, which is about the same as the golden core of Daoism and the Saraira of Buddhism. Li Qingshan's eyes lit up even more. After undergoing the 2nd heavenly tribulation, he would be a great master in this world. Even if he did not run amok, he would be able to move about freely. He never thought he would actually come across a cultivation method like this in this tiny bookstore. Wasn't this luck equivalent to buying a god artifact from a street stall or picking up a divine beast from the side of the road? However, I don't recommend you practice this cultivation method. Li Qingshan was surprised. Why is that? Even if it was incomplete, he could find a way to gather the complete one. Once he reached foundation establishment, his strength as a demon would definitely become even greater. As long as he found the Ocean Sect, he refused to believe he could not obtain the 2nd half, whether it was through trickery or by force. The old man seemed to see through Li Qingshan's thoughts. He sighed. The Ocean Sect has already been annihilated in the cultivation world 1,000 years ago. Otherwise, why would I be bold enough to sell the sect's secret manual? Annihilated? Who annihilated it? Rather than saying that it was annihilated, it would be more accurate to say that it was unable to recruit suitable disciples. The one who sold this half of the cultivation method to me was a descendant of the Ocean Sect. His aptitude was not enough to cultivate this cultivation method, and I don't know where the 2nd half is. I've been trying to find out all these years, but I've found nothing. Otherwise, the value of this book would be more than 10 times higher. Li Qingshan was immediately disappointed. Even the old man who specialized in buying and selling books had said so. If he wanted to find it, it would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. However, he still held a glimmer of hope. Perhaps I can try to use this incomplete manual to cultivate to foundation establishment first. At most, I'll just switch to another cultivation method. The power of this cultivation method was truly tempting. At this moment, among the few qi practitioners in the bookstore, a middle-aged man with a red face and a red robe said, "Fellow Taoist, there's something you don't know. Not to mention how difficult it is to reach foundation establishment, the stronger the cultivation method, the more unique the nature of the true qi. When that time comes, it will be difficult for you to switch to another cultivation method." Li Qingshan was no fool either. He immediately understood what he meant. They were both water, but there was the water of the ocean as well as the water of the clouds and mist. Although they were both derived from the word water, they were like the many branches of a large tree. The higher they extended, the further apart the branches would be. Jumping from one branch to another would become more and more difficult. It was just like the old granny of the Black Yin True Chi. If she wanted to learn the art of refining corpses, she would be asking for trouble. Thank you for your reminder, fellow Daoist. May I ask for your name? The red-faced man said, I don't deserve my name. Fellow Daoist can choose a cultivation method first. Later, I'd like to invite fellow Daoist for a drink. Please don't refuse. Li Qingshan nodded slightly. The old man said, That's right. The more profound the cultivation method, the more guidance is needed from a senior. Seeing that fellow Daoist doesn't lack spirit stones, I have a cultivation method to recommend. The old man took the cultivation method catalog from Li Qingshan's hand and chose a cultivation method for Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan took a look and could not help but smile bitterly. It was actually another Gui water method of condensing qi, but upon closer inspection, the Gui water method of condensing qi was actually priced at 95 spiritual stones. It was more than 3 times more expensive than the regular Gui water method of condensing qi. It was labeled with the words, General Reference. He could not help but raise his head and look at the old man. The old man said, The Gui water condensation method has been improved by countless people. It can be considered a royal cultivation method. Not only is it easy to cultivate, but the Gui water true qi cultivated is also the most moderate. If fellow Daoist can cultivate it to the highest realm, you can use it as a foundation to cultivate almost any advanced water cultivation method. But fellow Daoist is a rogue cultivator. Without the guidance of a master, it can be considered to be innately disadvantageous. This Gui water condensation method records the cultivation experiences of many great cultivators. It will definitely be of great help to fellow Daoist. Li Qingshan nodded. It turned out that not only was this a cultivation method, but it was also a cultivation note. Of course, following the path of predecessors was much easier and safer than finding one's own path. Moreover, the old man was very far-sighted. If Li Qingshan could cultivate this cultivation method to the highest realm, his vision would no longer be limited to this store. He would have the opportunity to encounter more advanced cultivation methods. But this price is a bit too high. The red-faced man agreed and said, Yeah, who would buy such an expensive cultivation method? Even if he and his companions put it together, they wouldn't be able to gather so many spirit stones. The old man smiled and said, Knowledge is priceless. Moreover, this general reference manual has 7 more water element spells than the ordinary Gui water qi condensation technique. Whether fellow Daoist wants to pick herbs or fight with others, it will be very useful. Chapter 218. The red-faced man shook his head. Learning too many spells will distract you from other things, which is not good for your cultivation. The old man said, This is true for normal people, but with your talent in the water element, it will be much easier for you to learn these spells than normal people. Of course, this depends on your choice. I also have a version without these spells for only 60 spirit stones. If you don't have the cultivation notes, 30 spirit stones will be enough. The red-faced man was speechless. Geniuses and normal people were indeed not equal. Li Qingshan thought for a while and decided, Okay, this is it. I'll buy it. He immediately counted out 95 spirit stones and gave them to the old man. He didn't need a few dozen spirit stones, and the cultivation method was related to his future development, so he didn't need to be stingy in this place. The rosy-cheeked man and his companions were all dumbfounded. Li Qingshan had taken out almost 100 spiritual stones just like that. He did not seem like an independent cultivator at all. No, even if he was a disciple of a sect, it was rare for him to be so generous. Their gazes towards Li Qingshan became more and more enthusiastic, which made them even more determined to befriend him. The old man was also full of smiles. He took out a jade scroll from his 100 treasures pouch and gave it to Li Qingshan. No shop owner didn't like a straightforward customer, so it was worth the effort he put in to explain the method. The jade scroll was white and slightly yellow. There were many mysterious runes engraved on it. Although it was only a thin piece, it felt heavy in his hand. Li Qingshan tried to immerse his mind into it, and the 10 stages of the Gui water condensation qi method all appeared, corresponding to the 10 stages of training qi. Among them, the first stage was for those who directly practiced the Gui water condensation qi method. The content was similar to the simplified version of the innate training of qi method. The real core of the method was the last 9 stages, corresponding to the 8 extraordinary meridians and 12 standard meridians. He skimmed through it and found that the Gui water condensation qi method was much more complicated and mysterious than the innate training of qi method. His comprehension was average, and his education was mediocre. If he didn't have the notes, it wouldn't be easy for him to understand the profound meaning within. He took the right step. Not bad, this is exactly what I want. Thank you for your advice, uncle. Li Qingshan first put the jade scroll into his 100 treasures pouch. When he returned, he would compare it to the notes of various famous experts and slowly study it. You're too polite, fellow Daoist. The old man was also very satisfied. He thought of something and said, my store doesn't only have cultivation techniques. We also have all kinds of ancient books. I even have a few mental maps here. Fellow Daoist, you should take a look. If you're planning to go on an adventure, you'll need a mental map. Li Qingshan chose the cultivation method that he was going to cultivate, and his heart calmed down. He had the mind to think about other things. After listening to the old man's words, he asked, do you have a mental map of Qingzhou? The old man was mildly surprised. He smiled. You sure are ambitious, fellow. I only have the mental map of the Clear River Prefecture here. Qi practitioners normally don't need such a large mental map, so this should be enough for you. Sanctuary. Since you don't have it, then forget it. Li Qingshan only wanted to find out how much the mental map of the Green Province Gu Yenying had given him was worth so that he could return the favor in the future. He did not like owing people anything, no matter what it was. The old man said in a hurry, if you need a larger one, you can stay here for a few more days. I can find a way to get a mental map of the Rui Commandery, but the price, Li Qingshan smiled. There's no need. He had already thought it through. To Gu Yenying, this was just something she had done casually. She had probably forgotten all about it already. Even if he wanted to return the favor, was he supposed to use spiritual stones to do so? He would just be looked down on for no reason. Thinking about it now, the bag of spiritual stones that Gu Yenying had specially given to Wang Pushi outside Qingyang City definitely was not inferior spiritual stones. It could even make a foundation establishment cultivator feel extremely grateful, to the point of even being afraid to accept it so easily. Its value was probably much greater than all of Li Qingshan's possessions combined. However, there would be a day when he would stand before her. In the eyes of regular cultivators, these distant, unreachable goals did not make him depressed or discouraged. Instead, they filled him with endless fighting spirit. At the very least, he had taken another firm step forward now. Li Qingshan added, I'm still inexperienced, so I only have a smattering of knowledge regarding the cultivation community, such as some spiritual spring register. Are there any books here that specialize in this aspect so that independent cultivators can make up for some common knowledge? Coming out this time, Li Qingshan gained a deeper understanding of his severe shortcomings in this aspect. The spiritual spring register was still a small matter. There were so many spiritual herbs underground, yet he could not name a single one, nor did he know their value or how to use them. Now that he had come across such a great opportunity, he obviously had to make up for it. The old man smiled. You've come to the right place. He took out a bamboo slip and passed it to Li Qingshan. It was also a catalog. Apart from the spiritual spring register, there was also the spiritual artifact register and the demon beast register, which broadened Li Qingshan's horizons. There was also the classic of Materia Medica, which recorded the appearance and properties of spiritual herbs. It was something that Li Qingshan urgently needed. The importance of this knowledge to Li Qingshan was no less than a cultivation method. However, these books were far more complicated than cultivation methods. Aside from the classic of Materia Medica, there were several dozen other books that described spiritual herbs. The authors of every single one of them were different, and there were even many differences in their descriptions of spiritual herbs. Do you have any recommendations, uncle? It'd be best if it's something like the General Staff Department's encyclopedia. Of course. As a result, Li Qingshan spent almost another 100 spiritual stones and bought a jade slip. The name of the jade slip was the Book of All. Apart from introducing the various spiritual herbs and spiritual artifacts in detail, the book also recorded the knowledge of human geography, the detailed history of the Great Xia Empire, the anecdotes of various famous people, and even gossip like beauty charts. It truly was all-encompassing. With the book in hand, Li Qingshan felt like his future was becoming clearer and clearer. The Qi practitioners became even more surprised. The rosy-cheeked man said, "How extravagant of you, sir." He had taken out 200 spiritual stones without even batting an eyelid. Was he really just an independent cultivator? The old man's smile grew even wider. It was rare for him to come across such a large deal. It really had been the right decision to come to the Green Vine Mountain this time. Is there anything else you need, sir? However, I really can't think of anything else I can sell you. Li Qingshan said, "Are there any books that record Buddhist scriptures here?" "There are." The old man immediately fished out a jade slip from his 100 treasures pouch. The name of this book is the Scripture Pavilion. It's a compilation of Buddhist scriptures compiled by the great masters of the Chan Monastery of Devanaga. "I'll give it to you for free. Then I'll be thanking you, uncle." Li Qingshan accepted the jade slip. Right when he was about to bid farewell, the old man suddenly grabbed Li Qingshan's sleeve and shoved a paper book into Li Qingshan's hands. Li Qingshan wanted to say something, but the old man said, "Don't ask anything. Read it when you get back." His expression was slightly unnatural. Li Qingshan's eyes lit up. He stowed the book away in his 100 treasures pouch. Chapter 219. Li Qingshan ignored the curious gazes of the Qi practitioners. All he said was, "What's the matter, everyone? Please go ahead." The red-faced man did not ask too much. He waved his hand generously. "This isn't the place to talk. Let's talk in the tea house. Tea is tasteless. Is there a place to drink alcohol here? I'll be the host today." The Sacred Hall. Li Qingshan was in a great mood now that he had dealt with a few matters on his mind. The red-faced man smiled as well. "I prefer alcohol a little more. The 100 Flavors restaurant is just up ahead, but you can't fight with me over being the host." Li Qingshan held the jade slip of the Book of All in his hand. Many pieces of information about the 100 Flavors restaurant immediately appeared in his head. This was an extremely renowned restaurant in the cultivation community of the Clear River Prefecture. The chefs there were actually all Qi practitioners. Their cooking was similar to how Lu Ziyu brewed tea. They used methods that only Qi practitioners knew, and they used ingredients that regular people rarely saw. Li Qingshan smiled. Sure enough, this item was useful. It was like he had gathered the knowledge of several dozen know-it-alls into this thin jade slip. To an independent cultivator who had only just begun cultivating like him, it was basically a welcome gift from the heavens. However, independent cultivators who were willing to spend almost 100 spiritual stones on something like this were extremely rare. Disciples from sects all had masters who taught them the common knowledge of the cultivation community, so it was even more impossible for them to spend so much money. In the 100 Flavors restaurant, a few people sat down at a long table by the window. The red-faced man said, "I'm Han Xiong. These are my friends." He introduced Li Qingshan one by one, and the Qi practitioners all bowed. Li Qingshan nodded and returned the greeting. He introduced himself. "I'm Niu Juxia. May I know why you've invited me here, fellow Han?" He also thought that calling himself Niu Er was a little too perfunctory, so he just listened to Yu Zijin and called him Niu Juxia. "Don't tell me you're that Niu Juxia who defeated the inner disciple of the Pheasant's Grace Mountain, Song Ming, in a single strike?" Han Xiong felt deep respect and could not help but use honorifics. Li Qingshan did not expect that he would be so famous, so he humbly replied, "I was just lucky." The other 3 Qi practitioners, on the other hand, were surprised and confused. Unlike Han Xiong, they asked, "Brother Han, what's going on? Are you talking about that golden rooster gentleman, Song Ming? Li Qingshan almost broke into laughter. What golden rooster gentleman? That was even worse than tiger descending the mountain. Han Xiong explained to his companions. Li Qingshan didn't want to interrupt, so he looked at the restaurant. Just like the other buildings in the town, it was made of pure wood and emitted the unique fragrance of wood. The decorations were not luxurious. Instead, they were very plain. There wasn't even a single painting. It made people feel like they were here to eat and drink. The owner obviously had absolute confidence in his culinary skills. Just at this moment, a waiter walked over with a tray of dishes. He wore a square hat on his head and a white scarf on his shoulder. He deftly placed a pot of wine and a few delicate dishes on the table. His voice was full of enthusiasm as he introduced the origins of these dishes. His actions and speech were all very standard, but also somewhat mechanical. Li Qingshan took a closer look and realized that this was not a waiter at all. It was clearly a humanoid puppet, but it was very intricately made. It wore the clothes of a waiter, and its exposed skin was covered in some kind of paint. It looked exactly the same as a human skin. It was clearly not the type used for battle. Presumably, this market did not allow ordinary people to enter, but Qi practitioners were not willing to do the work of serving food and wine. Thus, they ordered these waiter puppets from the Mo family. Holy Hall at this time, Han Xiong finished explaining Li Qingshan's glorious achievements. The gazes of the Qi practitioners as they looked at Li Qingshan were filled with respect. The strongest among them, Han Xiong, was only at the 5th layer of Qi refining. Even if they combined forces, they wouldn't be able to defeat any of the inner disciples of the Three Mountains. They had originally thought that Li Qingshan was a little inexperienced Qi practitioner. Who would have thought that he was such a powerful figure? Han Xiong stood up and poured a cup of wine for Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan sat there without moving. He raised his cup and gestured slightly before downing the wine in one gulp. He smiled and said, "Fellow Daoist Han, can you tell me why you're here now?" Han Xiong also hurriedly downed the wine in his cup. "We're all members of the Truth-Seeking Society. This time, we're sincerely inviting you to join us, fellow Daoist Niu." What kind of sect was the Truth-Seeking Society? Li Qingshan quickly immersed his mind into the Book of All, but found nothing. Han Xiong said, "Fellow Daoist Niu, you don't have to worry. The Truth-Seeking Society is merely an association of itinerant cultivators. It's not some big sect, so the Book of All wouldn't have any records of it." An association of itinerant cultivators? This was the first time Li Qingshan had heard of such an association. He asked curiously, "Actually, I've never really understood what exactly is an itinerant cultivator." "That's what you don't know, fellow Daoist Niu. Itinerant cultivators don't just refer to cultivators who cultivate alone. As long as they don't come from a clan or sect, they're all itinerant cultivators." Li Qingshan said, "With fellow Han's cultivation at the 5th layer, it's more than enough for you to establish your own clan or sect." Han Xiong smiled bitterly. "Without my own heritage and legacies, how can I call myself a clan or sect? Normally, if a clan or sect doesn't have a foundation establishment cultivator, then even if you gather 100,000 Qi practitioners together, you'll still be an itinerant cultivator. You won't receive the recognition of the cultivation world. Speaking of which, my Han family is basically like a local tyrant in Wanshan City, 500 kilometers to the northeast. But in the entire cultivation world, we're not even worth mentioning. We're often ostracized and humiliated by sect disciples, which is why we've formed associations to protect ourselves." Li Qingshan said, "With fellow Han's strength at the 5th layer, can't you find a sect and join it?" He pointed at the towering mountains outside the window. "Like this green vine mountain." Han Xiong sighed. "I'm so old and I don't have startling talent like Brother Niu, so which sect will accept me? I can only explore it bit by bit on my own. What do you think, Niu Juxia? Do you want to take a look at our truth-seeking society?" Li Qingshan thought about it and agreed with him. The sect disciples he had seen so far were all young, yet they were already at the 5th or 6th layer. Judging from Han Xiong's appearance, he was in his 40s or 50s at the very least. his talent definitely could not be considered great. He vaguely remembered that Zhou Wenbin had said that sects usually only accepted young disciples. They had to grow up on the mountain, receive the teachings of their masters, and be taken care of by their senior brothers and sisters. Only then would they have a sense of identity and belonging to the sect. This was also the foundation of the existence of a sect. Li Qingshan weighed his words in response to Han Xiong's invitation. I'm afraid I don't have the time. And I might even join a sect in the future. Seeing that Li Qingshan did not explicitly reject him, Han Xiong became even more enthusiastic. The Truth-Seeking Society is not a sect, so we won't ask you to do anything. We just gather once in a while to exchange our experiences in cultivation or exchange resources. It won't waste any time. The three practitioners beside him echoed, That's right, that's right. Everyone gathers together to drink and chat. It's so joyous. Last year, we even organized a group of people to enter the Boundless Mountains and found a few hundred kilograms of black iron essence. Li Qingshan had a better understanding of the nature of this truth-seeking society. Han Xiong said, How about this? After a while, we will have a gathering in the quiet Spring Valley. You can go and take a look. If you don't like it, we won't force you. Let me think about it. Li Qingshan raised his wine cup and said no more. Han Xiong exchanged glances with his three companions and said no more. Come, let's drink. Li Qingshan looked out of the window at the brightly lit market and the endless stream of Qi practitioners on the streets. He asked curiously, Is this place always so lively? Han Xiong said, How is that possible? It's because the decennial herb gathering ceremony of the Three Mountains is approaching. That's why so many Qi practitioners are here to prepare. Li Qingshan was confused. The herb gathering ceremony of the Three Mountains? What does it have to do with normal wandering cultivators? Han Xiong said, The disciples of the Three Mountains are strong. They go to gather herbs and attract the attention of the demons. We wandering cultivators have the chance to fish in troubled waters. Aren't we being used by the Three Mountains as bait to attract the demons? Li Qingshan turned around and saw the fourth-layer Qi practitioner named Zhou Wei smiling coldly. Han Xiong said, Anyway, the more people, the safer it is. Safer? I don't think so. Countless Qi practitioners die underground during the herb gathering ceremony. How many of them die to the demons? Underground? Isn't it the Boundless Mountains? Li Qingshan was surprised and put down his cup. Han Xiong smiled. Brother Niu, you really don't know anything. Almost all the spiritual herbs in the Boundless Mountains that can be harvested have been harvested. If we go deeper, we'll attract a demon general and all the Qi practitioners will die. Who would dare to go deeper? Li Qingshan had an ominous feeling. He continued asking, Are there no demons or demon generals underground? Han Xiong said, Of course. Speaking of which, some underground places are even more dangerous than the Boundless Mountains. However, it's much safer to go underground and head southeast. Wasn't that the territory ruled by Millipede? Li Qingshan asked hurriedly, Why is that? He had already vaguely guessed the answer. Han Xiong was happy to show off his knowledge. If you ask someone else, they might not be able to tell you the answer. However, the leader of the Truth-Seeking Society has a friend who is a core disciple of the Burial Mound Mountain. That's why I know. If we were to gather herbs in other places, if we were to slay demons and hunt for their fey cores, we would definitely attract the attacks of demon generals. It would be lucky if 9 out of 10 people could survive. However, this place rarely attracts demon generals. Furthermore, the herb gathering ceremony will only begin in 1 or 2 months. Do you know why? Because we have to wait until the weather is at its coldest. It's said that the demon general will enter hibernation at that time. It's the best time to kill demons and harvest spiritual herbs. It doesn't matter even if we turn the underground upside down. Li Qingshan was suddenly at a loss for words. He knew that Millipede's 2 hobbies were eating and sleeping. Even if it wasn't winter, he would probably be lying on the stone platform without moving most of the time. That was why Qi practitioners could take advantage of him. But why had he only heard Millipede talk about the pressure from the other demon generals? He had never heard of the threat from the surface. Why should we be afraid of demon generals? Aren't the leaders of the Three Mountains Foundation establishment cultivators? As long as they work together, they should be able to kill even a demon general. Han Xiong's eyes widened. Fellow Daoist Niu, you don't even know about the Treaty of Kings? The sudden increase in volume startled the Qi practitioners at the neighboring table. They all looked over at Li Qingshan with shock and disdain. It was as if it wasn't that Li Qingshan didn't know about the Treaty of Kings, but that he didn't know that the sun was round. Zhou Wei said, "Fellow Daoist Niu, it's not strange that you haven't heard of it since you've only just left the mountain. The Book of All must have extremely detailed records about it. Why don't you take a look?" Li Qingshan gripped the jade slip and sank his thoughts into it. He immediately received all the information about the Treaty of Kings. The information was very complicated. If he were to read it one by one, he would probably not be able to finish it even in 3 days and 3 nights. However, after skimming through it, he had a rough idea of what was going on. He understood why the other Qi practitioners were so shocked. Qi practitioners who did not know about this could be said to have not even begun to understand it. The Treaty of Kings originated from the founding emperor of the Great Xia dynasty. Legend had it that he had the bloodline of demons. When he conquered the world, he received the help of many powerful demons and established the Great Xia dynasty. After establishing the Great Xia dynasty, the most important and illustrious titles were the Human King of the 8 provinces and the Demon King of the 10 territories. The founding emperor presided over the Treaty of Kings. After 100 days of discussion, they signed a treaty that divided the boundaries between demons and humans. The two races would never invade each other. What deterred Millipede from taking a step above ground was not the demon commander above him, nor was it even the Dragon King of the Sea in the Green Province. Instead, it was the treaty from several millennia ago. However, low-level demonic beasts had limited intelligence, while there were far too many Qi practitioners, making them very difficult to restrain. As a result, whether it was demonic beasts charging above ground or Qi practitioners venturing underground, they were all tolerated and tacitly agreed to. Of course, if they were killed in the other party's territory, they would just be seeking death. The treaty truly restricted humans and demons who had undergone the first heavenly tribulation, whether it was Foundation establishment cultivators venturing underground to kill demons or demon generals venturing above ground to kill humans. The best outcome was the offender being hunted down by the combined efforts of the two races. The worst outcome was the flames of war reigniting, and all humans and demons would be sucked into it. Today, 3 Foundation establishment cultivators ventured underground to kill a demon general. Tomorrow, it was possible for a demon commander to appear and slaughter all the Qi practitioners on the Green Vine Mountain and in the town. Even with how bold Li Qingshan was, he shivered at the thought of that. However, when he heard that Foundation establishment cultivators would not venture underground, he eased up slightly. However, his mind was in turmoil. As the leader of the demon soldiers, demons and demons were all his subordinates. He could not allow anyone to slaughter him. As for the various resources underground, he had absolute control over them. He would never hand them over to someone else. If he were a pure demon, he would obviously return underground immediately and gather the demons. He would lay down a trap and slaughter all the invaders. That way, he would be able to obtain many hundred treasures pouches. However, he was still a human at the end of the day, so this decision would not be so simple. For a moment, he was even in the mood to eat. He became patient again and asked Han Xiong about more matters regarding the herb-gathering ceremony before bidding farewell. Han Xiong could tell that Li Qingshan's interest had waned, so he did not force him to stay. Instead, he tried to persuade him to pay a visit to the quiet Spring Valley. After asking about the time and location, Li Qingshan agreed in the end. It was no longer just for the sake of broadening his horizons. The quiet Spring Valley was not far from here. The gathering was before the herb-gathering ceremony. No matter what his decision was, he had to pay attention to the changes here. Arriving downstairs, Li Qingshan ordered another table of food and wine. He put them into his 100 treasures pouch to take away. It was late at night. Li Qingshan found an inn to stay for the night. He spent 5 spirit stones and booked the best room. Under the guidance of the owner, he opened the old door. The space inside was much larger than he expected. He knew that some kind of formation had been used to increase the space inside. Although it was winter, the room was as warm as spring. The room was covered with a thick silk carpet. The patterns on the carpet did not seem to be patterns, but some kind of formation. It caused the spiritual energy in the room to be slightly denser than it looked. There was a jade screen embroidered with an exquisite beauty holding a pipa. When the owner knocked on the screen, a moving sound of stringed instruments could be heard. There was a praying mat in the room that was said to be able to gather the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. It was said to be very helpful for cultivation. There was actually a huge bathing pool in the room. Not only could it gather water by itself, but it could even use 2 glyphs to control the water temperature. Not only had Li Qingshan never seen the various gadgets made by Qi practitioners before, but he had never even thought about them before. They were not exactly technologically advanced, but they were definitely extremely comfortable. Before the owner left the room, he suddenly stopped. He smiled in a way that all men understood. If you find it hard to sleep alone, I do know a few young and beautiful female cultivators. All you need are a few spiritual stones. He treated Li Qingshan as a generous, yet inexperienced, wealthy customer. Li Qingshan immediately had no idea how to react. He felt like he had crossed over to another world in this situation. However, he had no idea whether the police, no, the Hawkwolf Guard would come to inspect the room. He waved his hand in a hurry and declined righteously. "There's no need. I want to rest." The owner showed a rather regretful expression. He said reluctantly, "There's a communication talisman in the room. If you need anything, feel free to call me." Li Qingshan closed the door and exhaled. He placed down the bamboo basket on his body and opened it. "You can come out now." Little and extended her hands towards him. Li Qingshan said, "Can't you come out yourself?" However, he had already scooped her up and placed some food and alcohol on the table. "Let's eat." He casually took out the jade slip from the scripture depository and passed it to Little and before sitting down to one side. He leaned on his hand as he watched Little and eat. However, his mind had already wandered off somewhere. He was not even in the mood to take out the Gui water method of condensing qi. Little and said softly, "Aren't you going to eat?" Li Qingshan said, "I've already eaten." However, Little and had already delivered a piece of fish to his mouth. "You really are becoming more and more disobedient," said Li Qingshan as he ate the fish. "What do you think I should do?" Little and asked in confusion, "What do you mean?" Li Qingshan said, "That shitty herb gathering ceremony, of course." Little N's face was filled with surprise. "Aren't you going to kill them all?" Li Qingshan was taken aback. "Since when did I say that? It's not like I know them, and they're not here for me either. Starting a massacre like this isn't too good, is it?" Little N lowered her head. "But I don't know them either." To her, that reason was enough. No, it should be said that she did not need any reason at all. Apart from the man before her, anyone else could die. Strangely enough, because of each other's existence, neither of them could become great demons who did whatever they wanted. Welcome to Immortal Cultivation Audiobooks, your gateway to the mystical world of Xianxia. Dive into legendary tales of martial arts, spiritual growth, and immortal ascension. Here, we bring you full-length English audiobooks of the best Wuxia and Xianxia stories, from young prodigies to ancient sect wars. Perfect for fans of Against the Gods, martial world, and tales of demons and gods.